Fellas, the flyweight division is starting to turn up this year. We've just had a fight night main event in Taira and Perez, and I feel like the flyweight is starting to become actually interesting. We've got a lot more names in the mix now of the flyweight division. There's a lot more interesting fights that can be made, and I feel like the flyweight division is finally starting to turn up a little bit. So I think it's the perfect time to matchmake the flyweight division. The fights that make sense, the fights that would be extremely fun to watch as a fan, and fights that we just need to see in the flyweight division between these ranked fighters. So I'm going to be matchmaking most of the flyweights in the rankings of the flyweight rankings, some title fights, some #1 contender fights, and just fights that I think would be really fun and make a lot of sense. So let me know your thoughts on these matchups, but we'll go in there with the title fight. And I think the next title fight should be Alejandro Pantoja versus the winner of Manel Kape and Mohamed Mokaev. Now, I don't know if Mokaev and Manel Kape has been officially confirmed as the #1 contender fight, but I think it should be, because Pantoja's already beaten a majority of the guys in the top 5, and I know he's also beaten Manel Kape, but Manel Kape's starting to pick up a few wins, and a lot of those guys in the top 5 are coming off losses, or they're in a bit of a weird state in their career, so I think this is a good matchup for Pantoja, because if Manel Kape wins, that's a really promotable fight right there, because let's be honest, Manel Kape versus Pantoja. Manel Kape is going to be one of the few flyweights that would actually promote the fuck out of that fight. Manel Kape would promote that fight so much. I think it's an interesting fight as well. If Manel Kape can shut down a grappling prospect in Mohamed Mokaev, he can face the champion who's a heavy grappler as well in Alejandro Pantoja. I think it's an interesting fight, and I think it's a really good fight in the flyweight division if Manel Kape is able to beat Mohamed Mokaev at UFC 304. And if Mohamed Mokaev wins, he'd have been undefeated, which obviously you can push that narrative going into the fight. He would have had his best win yet in Manel Kape. He's also beaten Perez. He's also beaten Tim Elliott. Mokaev's going to have a lot of hype to his name, and everyone's going to want to see him face Pantoja, and it will be the fight that we need to make. And also, what's quite interesting is it's a completely different style to what Pantoja's used to, because Pantoja's used to facing strikers. He's facing strikers in the flyweight division that he kind of has the same game plan against, and then the few grapplers that Pantoja has gone against, he's lost to. So you can see him against another grappler in Mohamed Mokaev, and potentially that could be a big problem to Pantoja based on what we've seen in the past, but it would have a lot of hype, this matchup, especially for the fact that Mokaev's undefeated and it's a completely different style. So I think the winner of Manel Kape and Mohamed Mokaev at UFC 304 should face Pantoja, and I think this fight should probably take place maybe towards the end of the year, maybe like September to December, that period of time. I think we should see Pantoja versus either Mokaev or Manel Kape, and it's a fight that I think would be really interesting. So that's what I think Pantoja should do next. We've already seen him against the Royvals, we've already seen him against the Morenos, and I don't want to see him versus Amir Albazi just yet. So I think the winner of Mokaev and Manel Kape, put them against Pantoja for a title shot, and I think that should be the official #1 contender fight at UFC 304. Pantoja versus Mokaev and Manel Kape. And then we need another #1 contender fight. So obviously the winner of Mokaev and Manel Kape is going to be facing Pantoja, but what about after that? I think I've got the perfect #1 contender fight that makes the most sense in my opinion, and it is Brandon Royval versus Amir Albazi. Royval's in this weird position where he kind of deserves a title shot because he's got a really good win over Brandon Moreno, in which most people didn't expect him to beat, and he's now got that win over Moreno, but at the same time he has just lost to Pantoja in December. It feels like we've just seen him face Pantoja and lose pretty comfortably. He's lost to Pantoja twice now. I don't think we could just chuck him straight back in there in the title picture. So I think he needs one more legitimate win before he gets a title shot, and that is why I've matched him up against Amir Albazi. Amir Albazi is also in this position where he's got a really good win over Kai. Well, not a really good win because he's beaten Kai Kara France, but it was a robbery. Kai Kara France should have won that fight, and now Amir Albazi needs one more win that is going to get him that title shot that he really wants. And I feel like beating #1 ranked Brandon Royval is the perfect opponent to do that, and I feel like it'll be a pretty interesting fight as well. You've got Amir Albazi, heavy grappler, versus Brandon Royval, who's a very elusive and very slick boxer. I think this is a fight that we need to see. Potential fight night main event, if not just stick it on a pay-per-view somewhere. Brandon Royval, Amir Albazi, like I said, assuming that the winner of Manel Kape and Mohamed Mokaev is going to be taking on Pantoja towards the end of 2024. Maybe we can do this fight towards the end of 2024, and then the winner gets a title shot in 2025. So Brandon Royval, Amir Albazi, they're both one win away from a title shot, so why not match them up against each other to find out who really is going to be facing for, well, whoever the champion is for the belt next. list. And then for another fight that I think really makes a lot of sense, Brandon Moreno versus Steve Erceg. Let's do this fight for UFC 305 in Perth, Australia, in Steve Erceg's hometown. Steve Erceg versus Brandon Moreno. Now, Brandon Moreno, he's on a bit of a losing streak. He's lost to the champion Pantoja 3 times, and obviously he's just lost to him at UFC 290. And then he came off that loss to Brandon Royval, and let's be honest, he should have won that fight. That is a fight that he should have won. And I don't want to see Moreno against a Royval again, or a Pantoja. I want to see Moreno against fresh blood. We've seen him against these guys, and I'm just sick of Moreno rematching everyone. We need to see him against fresh blood, and I feel like Steve Erceg is the perfect opponent, because Steve Erceg's relatively new to the flyweight division, right? He's only had like 4 fights in the UFC, and he had the fight with Pantoja that was super close. A lot of people thought Steve Erceg won that fight, so there's no shame in losing to Pantoja. So I think we need to keep Steve Erceg at the top, and I think him versus Moreno was a great fight, because it's another difficult fight for Steve Erceg, but it's also a fight that means a lot if he is able to beat Brandon Moreno. So I think like Moreno versus Erceg, it's a big fight. It's a fight that we can give Moreno to stop him just rematching everyone. So Moreno versus Steve Erceg in UFC 305. This would be an absolute banger. They're both well-rounded. They've both got really good boxing. I'd say these guys are the best boxers in the flyweight division. And it's a big fight for both of them, because if Moreno can beat Steve Erceg, that's another win for Moreno to get back on track with a lot of momentum. And if Steve Erceg can beat Brandon Moreno, he's just beaten one of the top guys, and he's had a really close fight with Pantoja. Steve Erceg can also make a case to say that he wants a title shot soon. So Erceg versus Moreno, UFC 305. Let's book this fight. And the next fight that I've got is Tatsuro Taira versus Kara France. Now, obviously, last night, Tatsuro Taira was able to finish Alex Perez, which is his best win, and he's got a lot of momentum to his name. He's undefeated. He's a big prospect in the flyweight division, and he needs a fight that is going to push him into the top 5 now. He's got that good win over Alex Perez, but I'm sure he's going to want that win that is going to get him those big fights, and that is why I've done him versus Kara France. Kara France is on a losing streak. He lost to Brandon Moreno by finish when he got that interim title fight, and then he lost to Amir Albazi, but it was a really close fight. It wasn't like it was a bad loss at all. Most people thought Kara France should have won that fight, and I think this is a really good comeback fight, because if Kara France can beat Tatsuro Taira, he's just shut down an undefeated flyweight prospect, and if Kara France is legitimately able to beat Taira, and the fact that he got that robbery loss over Amir Albazi, people are going to want to see Kara France face these guys in the top 5 of the flyweight division, like the Brandon Royvals and like these other guys at the top end of the flyweight division. And if Tatsuro Taira can beat Kara France, that is going to be his best win yet. He's faced a guy that's been at the top of the flyweight division for ages, and that is going to push Tatsuro Taira into the top 5, and it's going to let him get those matchups that are going to push him closer to that title shot. So Taira versus Kara France, again, such an interesting fight, because they're both well-rounded, they're both dangerous strikers, especially the way that Tatsuro Taira's boxing has improved a lot in his last few fights. This is a fight that we need to see. Taira versus Kara France. I want to see this fight as a comeback fight for Kara France, and I think it needs to happen in the flyweight division. Next up, we've got Joshua Van versus Matt Schnell, and I know there's going to be people out there saying that Joshua Van doesn't deserve this matchup because who is he beaten, but I feel like Joshua Van's been done dirty. It feels like every single time this guy gets a fight booked, it gets cancelled. Every single time he gets matched up against an opponent, it gets cancelled, and I feel like if we need to give Joshua Van a reliable fight, we need to give him a ranked opponent, and that is why I'm giving him Matt Schnell. We've matched him up against these unranked guys. All these guys are missing weight. All these guys are pulling out. So let's just give him a big step up in competition and give him a little bit of a test in Matt Schnell. Now, if Joshua, first of all, this would be a great fight. Let's be honest. I mean, this would be an absolute banger between Matt Schnell and Joshua Van, and I can almost guarantee it would not go to the judges' scorecards. But if Joshua Van can beat Matt Schnell, again, that's his best win yet. He's proven that he's able to beat a fighter in the top 15 of the flyweight division, and that from there, obviously, we can start seeing Joshua Van against those top guys, because Joshua Van is another prospect in the flyweight division, and I would love to see this guy face the ranked opponent. So beating Matt Schnell, who's quite a winnable guy with the way that Matt Schnell's chin is looking nowadays, I think that's a really good win for Joshua Van. And Matt Schnell, he's on a losing streak. He needs momentum. Shutting down the prospect of Joshua Van by beating him is exactly what he needs to do in the division. So Joshua Van versus Matt Schnell, it would be a banger, and it is a fight that I think we need to see in the flyweight division, and it would benefit both of their careers if they are able to get a win over one another. So I'd do Joshua Van versus Matt Schnell for the next matchup in the flyweight division. And then finally, this is a bit of a weird matchup because it consists of the outcome of two other matchups on this list, but it is the loser of Mohamed Mokaev and Manel Kape versus the winner of Joshua Van and Matt Schnell. So The winner of Joshua Van and Matt Schnell, they're going to want a bigger fight in the top 10. They're going to want a fight that is going to progress them into the rankings. They're going to want a more difficult matchup, and they're going to want a fight that is fresh that they haven't had yet. And that is why I think they should face the loser of Mokaev and Manel Kape, because let's say Mohamed Mokaev loses, for example. He's no longer going to be undefeated. The hype would have died down a little bit, but he's already proved that he's a dangerous guy. And I feel like if it's either Van versus Mokaev or Schnell versus Mokaev, it's a fight that I think they're going to want to progress in the flyweight division. And if Manel Kape loses, he's lost to undefeated Mohamed Mokaev, and I think Manel Kape versus Joshua Van and Manel Kape versus Matt Schnell would be an absolute banger. So Mohamed Mokaev versus Manel Kape, the loser should face the winner of Joshua Van and Matt Schnell. But that is my matchups in the flyweight division. Fights that I think make a lot of sense, fights that I think would be really fun. So let me know your thoughts on these matchups, and yet, you know, your predicted outcomes for these fights. Do you actually like the matchups? And thank you for watching.